Welcome back, everybody, to another episode on Misfit TV. This is the Buckets Only podcast, and I am your host, Jay, and my friend Jake is here with me as well. Jake, how are you doing today, my man?
Ready for some game sevens and second round action.
Well, look, bro, on Misfit TV, we bring everybody entertainment and sports, and today we are locked into what I hope is going to be a more entertaining second round. We still have a couple of game sevens on the boat as of when we're recording this, being September 1st, but we're going to discuss that a little bit later on, as well as put together a couple of our picks for the second round overall. So we're going to start off with the Eastern Conference. Now, Jake, this side of the bracket is already up and cracking. Right now, they are in the midst of game two, being the Celtics and the Raptors, and it's looking like anybody's game. But the Celtics won handily, 112-94 in the first game. Looking at that game and moving forward, who do you have winning this series, and who do you think is going to be the reason why?
I think the Celtics are going to take it. I mean, they've been my pick to come out of the East pretty much since the season began. Um, I just think they have all the right pieces, especially, I mean, not especially, but even without Hayward, they're still like a solid all around team. Their center, like Daniel Tice, isn't all that. He's not a guy that wows you, but at this point in your career, neither is Marc Gasol. And so that's the one matchup that I'm not too worried about with the Celtics. And then, I mean, Jason Tatum is going to be Jason Tatum. He's one of the better finishers in the league already. He can shoot the ball, he can play make, he can play defense. He's just the kind of a guy that can do everything. And they have Kemba Walker to kind of take care of Lowry and Van Vliet. But yeah, I think Boston takes this series.
Yeah, man. I think that the biggest thing in game one is like so interesting is honestly that, from a center standpoint, when it comes to losing Gordon Hayward, they had, like you mentioned before, Daniel Tyson, also Robert Williams step up. I mean, considering that, I think coming into this year, not even just like the playoffs in general, but this entire season, with the exit of Al Horford to the 76ers, the idea was that the Celtics' big hole in their roster was at the center position. It seemed like 1 through 4, they could pretty much slide about anybody they could think of on their roster into a lineup, and it would relatively work itself out. But the question was, where would the production come from that interior? Daniel Tice, Robert Williams combined for 23 points in that game. And honestly, I think that game one was a complete group effort as it was. I mean, Jason Tatum and Marcus Smart both had 21 points. There were 6 guys who scored in double figures in total. But I think the real issue here, right? The real difference between whether or not this series goes to 7 or whether or not this series gets killed early really comes down to the Raptors and their ability to step up, specifically their star players being Pascal Siakam and Kyle Lowry. Those two guys combined for 30 points in game one. Combined for 30 points. Not one of them had 30, not the other one had 30, combined for 30 points. That cannot be a nightly output if they plan on trying to make this series go the distance. I think that unfortunately for the Raptors, this is more their series to lose than the Celtics taking it from them, because I feel like as a committee, their team is relatively deep, and we've preached about the depth of their team with guys like Norman Powell, Terrence Davis, Chris Boucher, Serge Ibaka, different guys who are able to step up and play significant minutes for them. But we getting deeper in the rounds, my man. So like when it comes to stars needing to step up, this is around that time. And if these two guys are not going to do their thing, I mean, even Fred VanVleet only had 11 points in the game. If that's going to be the type of output that these guys put up on a consistent basis, which I don't expect, but facing the Celtics, you never know. I really think that this series is more on the Raptors to lose than it is for the Celtics to take away from them. I think with that, another matchup that we have that kind of is in a similar boat is the Bucks versus the Miami Heat. The Bucks got their butts handed to them in game one. Let's just be realistic about it. Jimmy Buckets goes to the well and gets 40 points in game one, and they go up 1-0 with a 115 to 104 lead. Jake, I think the easy answer here, right, would be the Heat are dangerous and could take anybody's lunch money. So, of course, the Bucks should be a little nervous. But I think the real question is, what do you think that the Bucks need to do in order to get back into this series before you actually give your pick for it? What do you think that they need to do in order to get back into this series to notch things up, let alone make it competitive?
I think what they need to do is take it easy and not stress out. As crazy and unbasketball like that sounds, I mean, they lost the first game against Orlando too. And you had people starting to say, "Uh-oh, like, what's going on?" Like, they kind of gave up all those points to I'm sorry, to Orlando, not Miami. I'm talking about Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
They lost to game one in Orlando, and people were starting to say, like, "Uh-oh, like, what's going on with Milwaukee?" And then they came back and won four straight. So I get that that was kind of like a fluke game, and Miami is a legit team. But I still think they should just kind of take it easy on themselves. They can't get too battered down after one game. I think they just can't hit the panic button too early, and they still got to keep doing what they've done because there's a reason that they're the number one team in the East and the league.
Well, I mean, I would love to piggyback with you in terms of being able to calm down, but this also is not the Magic, bro. This is the other Florida team. And the thing that concerns me about the Bucks right now, bro, is Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson have 15 combined points. Do you think that's going to happen again? Because I surely do not. And those two guys can shoot from the parking lot. I mean, even Goran Dragic had an amazing game with 27 points. So I feel like their veteran guys stepped up in game one. Jimmy Butler and Goran Dragic, 67 combined points out of the 115 that they got. But I just don't see Tyler Hero and Duncan Robinson shooting like that anymore this series, essentially. And I think the big question for the Bucks moving forward is, who's the second guy? Like at this point in the season, I'm starting to get extremely confused about who the second guy is. I understand that Chris Middleton had 28 points. I understand that Brook Lopez had 24 points. But it seems like the time when you tend to pick up the scoring load is when your team is at a deficit. I didn't see that type of Chris Middleton when they needed big buckets down the stretch to be able to make the games close. Giannis Antetokounmpo is a guy who, after winning the Defensive Player of the Year, I'm worried about his mental. I'm not going to say anything too crazy after game one, but the dude was in his press conference after the game when he was asked about guarding Jimmy Butler, who put 40 on their head. Why would you even ask a question like that, he says. Well, because you're the Defensive Player of the Year and you're supposedly one of the top three players in the league, and players less of your caliber we would hope, right, would step up to the plate and defend the other team's best player in crunch times like that. And Jimmy Butler was doing things during the entire stretch of the game, but it was really the fourth quarter where he was really putting the team on his back, and we saw less of Giannis on Jimmy Butler down that stretch. My question on your end, right, is when picking your team, who do you think is going to win the series, for one, and who do you think is the X factor for that team winning?
I still think the Bucks are going to take it. You mentioned Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero combining for 15 points, but Giannis also only scored 18 points. Like that's not he shot like 6 of 12. That's not Giannis numbers. He's a guy that is expected to score between 25 and 30 each game. Um, and so I think he's going to bounce back just because he's Giannis and it's what all superstars do after a bad game. Not that 18 points is bad, but it's just compared to what he's expected to do to help the team win. I think he's going to have a bounce back game and a bounce back series. And then I actually see Brook Lopez as being this team's X factor. He's gonna have to be the primary defender on Bam, which is gonna be really telling on how this series goes. But then, like you said, if he goes off for 24 each night, or even close to that, like I think Milwaukee is looking pretty good if they can get Brook Lopez to score 24. And then Chris Middleton, like you said, almost scored 30. They're just waiting on Giannis. Like, and it's not, I wouldn't be worried if I was Milwaukee saying the Giannis's scoring is the only problem, because he can pretty much have his way whenever he wants, if he wants.
And I mean, it's hard to argue against that out of the fact that, Giannis's dominance, right? I don't feel like we've seen a ton of it during the bubble, and we're kind of just waiting for him to snap. We've seen a lot of very intricate plays for him. The two-step euro into a dunk that looks effortless, the jams over top of guys, the big block early in the game against Jimmy Butler that kind of made people look back and say, well, this is part of the reason why he was voted as the defensive player of the year and things of that nature. But I really think, to quote Stephen A. Smith, I have a funny feeling that the Heat are going to steal this series. Now, I don't have a ton of logic behind it. I have a lot of faith in Jimmy Butler, maybe more than I actually should. And I think I'm banking on the young guys in Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero to step up a lot more than maybe most should expect them to. But I feel like this is one of the top 3-point shooting teams in the league, despite the fact that their best player lives in the mid-range and in the paint. And honestly, this is a team that has an actual closer. I don't know if you can give Giannis the ball for the last 3 minutes of the game and tell him go to work, get his own shot, and finish the game out for them. I don't know if they have a guard on their team that can do it for them either. I mean, Eric Bledsoe hasn't taught me anything. And personally, outside of that, I don't think there's any other guard that I can ask of to really create their own shot on this team. So with that being the case, I'm going with the Heat in 7 games because I just feel like the Bucks aren't going to go out too crazy. Food for thought, though, that I think everybody should take into consideration moving forward when looking at this series, and also kind of looking at the perspective of the Bucks overall, right, is they came off in a very emotional tactic move, step up into a movement, I guess you could say, this past Thursday. And they have a lot of stuff going on within their own city, and they have something that they're kind of standing on right now. The question is whether or not that move is weighing on them or is going to help uplift their team. I think that's something that should really be taken into consideration moving forward, because something like that, although on a national and a racial scale, I couldn't commend more. From a winning basketball games perspective, the level of, mental fortitude you have to be able to step onto the court and be fully engaged after that, especially against a mentally tough team like the Miami Heat, is something worth, asking questions about as the series moves forward. Jake, do you have any comments regarding that portion of things, or, just the Bucks mentally moving forward in this series?
I mean, yeah, I think it definitely will weigh down on the Bucks a little bit more than most other teams, simply because Kenosha is in Wisconsin, and that's why you saw the Bucks really take the first action. Um, but I would also, I mean, this is kind of a side note. Shout out to the Toronto Raptors for being the only team in the National Basketball Association, not in the U.S., but being the first team to kind of reach out and consider boycotting, because they could just as easily say, look, we play in Canada, we don't have to worry about the US issues. But like you saw them, the only team, 1 out of 30 teams that plays outside of the US, being the one to take the initiative. I thought that really speaks a lot to kind of where we are as a nation.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great way to kind of transition into our 2 other teams who kind of stepped up and had their voices heard. this past week, and were willing to put the whole season on the deck, dude. A lot of reports came out that the Clippers and the Lakers both mutually voted out of all the teams that were still involved in the bubble that they were willing to pick up their ball and dip because they felt as though there was something bigger they could do off the court. Yet here we are in the second round, and they're the two teams waiting on the clock for their next opponent to show up. Before we can kind of really get into this series, Jake, just real quick hitters in terms of these game sevens. Again, we're recording this on September 1st, so we're waiting for these games to be played. So we're gonna just kind of give them a little call out real quick. Jake, speed round real quick. Who you got, Jazz or the Nuggets in game 7?
I got the Jazz. I see Donovan Mitchell just absolutely going off. And yeah, Jamal Murray is a beast too. But I think Rudy Gobert hasn't had a quiet series, but he's been really good this series, especially on the defensive end and the stats that don't show. He's looked really good when going up against Jokic. I also I like Joe Ingles. I know he didn't do very well last game, but if he can hit a couple open threes, I think that changes the series entirely for Utah. Um, and I don't know. I mean, a 3-1 lead is hard to come back from. Like the Nuggets have been through a lot when you talk about the boycotting and they were down 3-1. I don't know if they can mentally handle coming all the way back and actually winning a game 7. But I still think it's going to be a great game.
So, I mean, these are two teams that have two young guns in Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray, who both have put up two 50-point games in this series, which is historical. For those who don't understand the magnifications of that, I will only press it again. These guys are in line of a discussion with Michael Jordan in terms of playoff production in this series. With all of this in mind, let's take a look at the Lakers for a second. Jake, who would you rather see? Matter of fact, who would you rather, or for the Clippers actually, who would you rather see face off with the Clippers in the second round, and how do you think that they will fare against the Clippers moving forward?
I think from a Clippers standpoint, you hope that the Jazz win, simply because Rudy Gobert cannot shoot the basketball. And when you look at the Clippers big men in Zubac, he is a good player. He's a bit underrated, in my opinion, but he doesn't go out and guard the three. He's more of a traditional big man who doesn't leave the paint very often. And so going up against a guy like Nikola Jokic, who can actually drain threes, if you continue to let him have his way and you don't go out and contest him, he's going to make them. Whereas Rudy Gobert also plays like he and Zubac have more of a similar style of like traditional rebounding, blocking, like just big presence in the paint. I think that'll be a much more friendly matchup for the Clippers. So I think the Clippers are going to win their series either way. I could definitely see a series against the Nuggets going to 7 games, but I think if the Clippers have to play the Jazz, it might be over in 5 or 6.
So to kind of answer my own question and move in really quickly in terms of this game 7, I have the Jazz winning as well. I had them winning the series in 7 before when we made our initial picks. And I'm sticking with that. I feel as though, similar to you, a 3-1 lead is a hard thing to come back from. And it seems like Jamal Murray has literally put his soul into every game over the last 3 games. So I genuinely feel as though the Jazz will move forward regardless. And we discussed this off camera. I genuinely believe that the Clippers are going to beat up on whichever team comes out of this, just out of the fact that regardless of who makes it out, they are going to be physically and emotionally drained with a lot less time to kind of get it all together before they have to go against one of not only the better teams in the league, but really a team that we haven't even really seen the full strides of, right? I feel like regardless moving forward in these series, there's a lot of big takeaways that the Clippers can take from the Mavericks series and kind of moving forward build upon. For example, Montrezl Harrell is not going to have to go against two guys that are 7'3" and 7'4" every single night, being in Kristaps Porzingis and Bojan Marjanovic in terms of facing the Mavericks. He's not going to have to face up against those guys every night. And as an undersized center, I don't think he would want to have to go up against those guys on a consistent basis. Do we think that Paul George is going to be a guy who spends 4 out of 6 games scoring 15 points or less? I doubt it. I mean, I genuinely feel as though is that 30-point performance that he had more of the consistent moving forward? I'm not necessarily sure. But do I expect him to score more points than 15 on a nightly basis moving forward as the series get more high stakes? Of course. So with that all being taken into consideration, also with the fact that they were missing Patrick Beverley, which don't know how he's going to be moving forward, but getting him back is only a plus, and we all know that. So I genuinely feel like while the Clippers have a lot to look forward to, whatever team makes it out of this game 7 is only staring at potentially sitting in somebody's Lions den, because honestly, the Clippers are just chomping at the bits regardless. Another team that's chomping up at the bits is the Lakers, the team that I really wanted to talk to the point that I got so hyped and jumped the gun, because they have to face the winner of the Thunder versus the Rockets. Quick little housekeeping. Jake, who do you think is going to take this series, and how do you think they're going to fare if they were to move on?
I see the Rockets taking game 7. They were able to win the first 2 games of the series without Russ, and Russ was more of a negative piece to their team in his first game back. I mean, he had 7 turnovers, and I think he played less than 20 minutes. So to expect that out of one of the league's stars, for us, like to expect him to do that kind of production for at least another night, another game in a row, I don't see it happening. They still, like he said, he's still going to be on a minutes restriction, which who knows, it might help the Rockets if he's sitting on the bench while trying to get back into the swing of things. But Harden, I mean, I still Lou Dort looked like the answer for like the first bit of the series, and he's not a bad defender, but he can't be the guy you rely on. You can't rely on a rookie. I don't know if he was a second round pick or undrafted or what.
Undrafted out of
He's not a
ASU,
reliable.
actually. Yeah.
Yeah, you can't rely on an undrafted rookie to go up against one of the league's best, if not the best scorer in a game 7. I'm sorry, that's not your answer.
Well, I mean, I went with the Thunder before this series started, and boy, have they made me flip flop. I have never felt so conflicted about a postseason pick in my life. I mean, I was confident about them before the series started, and they've kind of had me on and off the bandwagon as the series has moved forward. But something that I realized earlier today, and I feel like it's kind of important to point out, is by Chris Paul forcing a game 7 with the OKC Thunder in this series, he is already single-handedly taken the Thunder further than Russell Westbrook did in the last 3 years post Kevin Durant. I feel like that is completely insane. And when putting into perspective that this is a team that everybody was counting out before the year started, everybody thought they were going to be the perfect trade partner. They were going to blow it up. They already have thousands of picks. They were going to look like the 2020 and 2021 draft saviors, just blue chippers all over the place. But now they're pushing a game 7 and could be putting the Rockets on the heels. I have to be honest, I picked the Thunder in 7, and I still would not be shocked if they shock the world and take things over. But personally, I'd rather see the Rockets in the second round, because I feel like their matchup against the Lakers is going to be a little bit more exciting. I feel like the star power of duo versus duo is exactly what is needed to really face up against the Lakers and challenge them in a way that I feel as though the Trailblazers could not. So I think that the Rockets move on. I think that James Harden gets the ball in the last 3 possessions versus Russell Westbrook moving forward, considering what we've seen. And I feel like he will be the difference moving forward for them in the Lakers series. Jake, how do you think What realistically do you feel like are the chances for the Rockets if they are to move forward and take have a matchup against the Lakers in this next round? Where do you feel like they stand if they were to face the Lakers in the next round?
I mean, if I didn't just see how poorly Portland played against the Lakers, I would have said that the Rockets have a really good shot. Um, I'm not saying it's impossible. I would actually not be surprised if the Rockets were able to take 2 games in the series or maybe even 3. I think it would take an insanely good performance from them just to win, like to actually win this series. Um, because I don't see small ball as the answer for the Lakers. I mean, you saw Anthony Davis kind of taking control of the Portland series even after he was being guarded by Hassan Whiteside and Yusuf Nurkic. I don't know how you're going to put Robert Covington on Anthony Davis, especially if Anthony Davis is the 4 and you have to put someone out there on JaVale McGee because Tyson Chandler is not the answer by that for that in any way. So I think they'll really have to if Houston wants any chance, they're gonna need to see the OKC Russ, and they're gonna really need to see vintage Harden.
Well, I mean, I think bouncing off of that, I think that's exactly why I see the Houston Rockets stealing this series in 7 games. And look, I think I might have learned my lesson to stop drinking the underdog tea when it comes to anybody playing against the Lakers. I definitely drank a little bit of the Kool-Aid when it came to the Trailblazers going against them. And of course, nobody could foresee Damian Lillard getting injured, Gary Trent having a slump after how he performed earlier in the seeding games, Carmelo Anthony not being as much of a factor. These are all things that, of course, we could not foresee. But the Lakers handled them pretty well. And I mean, outside of game one, there wasn't really anything that we feared from Portland moving forward. I don't see that in the Rockets. They have two superstars on their team. They're a team that shoots a high volume of threes. I mean, they were averaging about 52 to 53 threes per game throughout this series and a portion of the seeding games as well. This is a team that takes them at a high rate and may not make them at a high rate, but when you take 50 and you hit 20, you're always going to be in a ball game. I think that this series is really going to come down to 3-point shooting, and I do not think that the Lakers can match that. I understand that they can out rebound. I understand that they might be able to extend possessions because of Anthony Davis's presence on the floor. But unless you're telling me that Anthony Davis and LeBron James are both getting 40 a night and they're covering 80 of the 115 to 120 points that the Lakers are going to need to take out the Rockets on a nightly basis, I just still don't see the Lakers having the supporting cast to hold off the Rockets. Jake, what do you say to that?
I mean, I don't know. It's rough because I part of me wishes that Houston didn't trade Clint Capella. I mean, if they don't do that, then yeah, I definitely like the Rockets' chances against the Lakers. I just can't. I find it hard to get on board. Um, I don't think. I mean, outside of like LA obviously has a better duo. And when I look at the supporting pieces, I I thought Portland had much better supporting casts than Houston does. I mean, yeah, they have Robert Covington. I guess you could mention Daniel House. Um, but outside of that, I mean, I don't really think Houston has the weapons, especially if they're going to be on the floor with LeBron. I don't see who they have that can really guard LeBron, and certainly not AD. So I think it'll certainly rely on, I think LA is going to rely heavily on their star power. And I think it helps that LA is getting to sit back and watch this game go to 7 while they were done with their series a couple of days ago and have all this time to rest up and kind of refocus their energy. I think it's going to be like go, go, go for Houston and especially OKC. If they were to win game 7, which I still don't think OKC would have any chance, I would say Lakers in 4 if Oklahoma City makes it to the second round.
Well, I think that kind of gives us a great way to be able to transition into our question of the day. Our top seeds in the Eastern Conference and the Western Conference, being the Clippers, the Lakers, the Bucks, and the Raptors, are all going to be engaging in series against teams that are no slouch at all. So with that in mind, comment down below which one of the top seeds across those four teams do you think is the most likely to move on to the next round? We want to hear your thoughts in the comment section down below. Jake, this has been a fire episode, my bro. If you guys enjoy our content, like, comment, and subscribe. Check us out all over the place on Instagram. We're at MisfitTV right now, going crazy. We appreciate you guys keeping a lookout for our content. Jake, it's been fire, bro. We'll catch you guys on the next one.
See ya.
Peace.